I get accused of singing 19 verses to Amazing Grace and there's only 6. That's not true. The most I've sung was 10 verses, and that's Psalm 25 from the Geneva Psalter. So we'll sing the first verse, and then I'll sing the next 3, and then you can sing the last verse with me. Wounded for me, wounded for me, there on the cross he was wounded for me, bore my transgressions, and now I am free, all because Jesus was wounded for me, dying for me, dying for me. There on the cross he was dying for me, bore my transgressions, and now I am free, all because Jesus was dying for me. Risen for me, risen for me, up from the grave he has risen for me. Now evermore from death's sting I am free, all because Jesus has risen for me. Living for me, living for me. Up in the sky, he is living for me. Daily he's pleading and praying for me. All because Jesus is living for me. Coming for me, coming for me. One day to earth he is coming for me. Then with what joy his dear face I shall see. Oh, because Jesus is coming for me.
Hi, respected Brother Aaron. Lord, thanks so much for happening to have Aaron here this week as well. Lord, I pray you bless his time, bless his thoughts, and Lord, whatever he has to share for us, Lord, pray you open our hearts to that. Let's pray this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So do any of you remember the first day we had a little talk, and we talked about 3 principles of education. Do any of you remember what those 3, there were 3 things we talked about, and that's kind of the reasons that we take education seriously. Do any of you remember one of those things?
What you feed, you grow.
What you feed grows. Very good. Another one?
It's the responsibility of parents to train children.
It's the responsibility of the parents to train their children. And what is the last one? Jesus' words.
A student will be like his master.
A student will be like his master. Very good. Talked a little bit about yesterday about how to build a classroom, a disciplined classroom. Talked about starting with ourselves, being real, taking responsibility, building an atmosphere of trust, and dealing with a problem. We talked about education being the fact of passing on one generation's belief and value to the next generation. And today's talk is a little bit about that. We have schools and teachers, good teachers sometimes, and in a lot of our schools, when these teachers get done teaching and they move on to the next phase of their life, often because they can't afford to keep on teaching financially, another teacher, fresh from high school, is plopped in their place, and there's really no carryover of knowledge and wisdom from the last teacher to help the first teacher succeed. That's one of the weak places in our schools. When I was 20 years old, I got in my little purple Volkswagen and I hooked my little back rack on it, and I drove 3,500 miles from North Carolina to Oregon. And I had done all the teacher trainings and CLE and all the things that you're supposed to do before you go and teach for the first time. And I felt singularly inequipped to deal with those children. I had 16 students, I think, not a very big class. And I got there, and there they were, and they were all looking at me, and they wanted me to say things to them and teach, and I was terrified out of my wits. But in Oregon, they didn't just drop me off and leave me there. The first 2 weeks of my teaching there was teacher train equipping time. And the first day, the first half a day of school, I told them stories and we did a lesson in math, and it was my first day, and it was wonderful. I didn't have to deal with discipline things. We just had a wonderful day. After that, I sat in the back of the classroom with another teacher, another experienced teacher. And the teacher from the years before taught my class. And I watched her, and she was an amazing teacher. She was also my cousin. And I was amazed. And the experienced teacher sitting beside me was my mom from North Carolina. They flew her out there to do this. And we sat there and we watched this teacher teach, and my mom was like, "Do you see what she did there? That's really good. Do you see how that worked? That was really good. That was great." After the first couple days of watching her teach, I took a class, and there was, I think, maybe a math class, and they helped me prepare. This is what you're going to do. What are you going to say first when you stand up? Well, this is what I'm going to say. Well, that might not work so well. Try this. And I got up my math class around, and I taught a math class, and it was harder and easier than it looked, and it was wonderful. Well, then we did recess, and as the first week went by, we transitioned from her teaching to me teaching, and it was a tremendous experience, and to the point that it's hard to put a value on something like that. I benefited so massively from her experience right there in front of me in the classroom I was going to be teaching in, that I can't put it into words. I have been to many teaching classes, to college classes, things to try to help me be a better teacher, things like that. Very limited value, honestly, compared to watching an experienced teacher mentor you into a class. And I highly recommend those of you who have a school and dream about a school someday, come up with a mentoring program like that for your future teachers. Don't drop them in there. Find a teacher in your community, the last year's teacher if they did a good job. If not, find a teacher to mentor in your next teacher. Well, 3 years after I went to, I started teaching there in Oregon, a number of trips with the Volkswagen between North Carolina and Oregon, I moved from that situation to Bangladesh, and to teach there in their public schools, and it was a wonderful experience. Before I went, I did a TESOL with Miss Lynn Hartman, one of the best TESOL instructors alive today. Did a month with her, and it was really good, tremendous information, because teaching English in Bangladesh is a little different than teaching in a school in America, because you don't have books. And there's all kinds of discussions about curriculum, but trust me, almost any curriculum is better than no curriculum if you're the teacher. And to make your own lessons every day for many classes and do a good job teaching them is an overwhelming amount of work. I was supposedly equipped to do this. I got to my class, my first class there in Bangladesh, a large school, small class. I took the top, I think maybe I took the top 15 boys from class 6 in this very first school that I taught in over there, and they came in the first day. I knew no Bangla. I knew how to say apni kemon achen, which is hello, and nothing else. And they didn't know any English. And so we had what do you do? What are the first words you say? Me, man, you, kid. I heard later one of the teachers there, the other teachers, he was kind of a jerk. He was telling the other teachers from the school that my teaching at that point was drawing the picture of a cat on the board and saying cat, and not in a flattering way. Anyway, my teaching wasn't going very well, so I got on a train but it was par for the course for the teachers that were going over there. This was normal. I said, why is it like this? And they said, oh, it's just how it is. You just struggle through it so you can be in the country, and the teaching is not why we're here. It's a miserable part of the thing, but we just try to get past it and keep on, witnessing and stuff. Okay, well, that's not what I was happy with. Got on a bus, went about 12 hours to a school where my brother was teaching, who's an amazing person, and I sat in his classroom, and he had been over there teaching for a while, and he was on a very good team of teachers that helped each other succeed, and I learned more sitting in his class one day than I learned in my TESOL for a month. And I went back to my school, and my teaching was completely different. I knew how to do it. I knew what to do. I knew which route to go when I was planning my lessons. I knew kind of the structure of how a class looked when it worked. And my teaching in Bangladesh turned into an absolute delight. And every year I taught, it got better. It was fun. It was wonderfully fun. Now, if I hadn't been equipped, I think I would have probably burned out and left, like a lot of teachers do. Fast forward about 5 years of absolutely wonderful teaching in Bangladesh, and we went to Romania. And we started doing kind of the same kind of thing. We're trying to teach people English so they can do an English curriculum so they don't have to send their children to public schools. And I was tasked with the job of teaching teachers how to teach this kind of way. And so we talked about it for a long time. We did classes to prepare these teachers. They all went to TESOL here in the States and tried to get equipped with that. But we realized the difference between knowledge and practice, and head knowledge and experience. I think to teach a person to be a teacher has very little to do with giving them knowledge, and much more to do with giving them experience and wisdom and equipping to do the job. And so we have a program going on over there now that if a new teacher comes, so far I've been the one that mentors them, but we have other teachers ready to mentor in new teachers now, and they come and they sit. We start off the same way. They sit in my class for the first day, and usually the next day I really like if they take a class. I help them plan. How's your lesson going to look? Here's some ideas, and then they teach one lesson, and then so on and so forth. It has been tremendously effective, to the point that if you're a homeschool mom or dad and you're putting energy into your children, your classes don't feel like they're going well, you can go and do CLE teacher training, you can do all those things, but I would highly recommend that you go find a teacher that is a good teacher, a good homeschool mom, and you just go, bring your children, bring their books, go sit in her class and let her teach, and you watch her and you take notes and you spend a day or two there if she'll let you, and learn from her. And if you have a school and you're thinking about doing a school and you want your teachers to learn, find the best teachers you know and have them mentor in the next teachers. And develop that concept, that idea in your community, in your family, that we don't drop. I mean, it's ridiculous. I also weld a lot of the time, and to teach another person how to weld, we don't even think about having them read some books on welding, giving them a helmet and a welding gun, whatever you're doing, and say, there's metal, weld. We don't even think of that. They sit there looking in there with their welding helmet at the welding that I'm doing. I learned from a tremendously good welder, and I watched him weld. I welded after him. No, that's not right. Change your heat. This is how you do a vertical. This is how you do an overhead. Okay, yeah, well, let me try it. And you mentor your way in. That was one part of this talk. When we're talking about passing on value and things of value, when I was over in Bangladesh I had been over there about 3 years, and I was in Dhaka studying Bangla, and I was loving it, I was enjoying it. And one day I came back from my class, and I did some private classes there in the city too, and I was having an absolutely wonderful time, and burning myself out and all that, which is a great thing to do, to burn yourself out for the Lord, and I think a lot of you know what that's like. But I came home from class, and I was tired, and I laid down and took a nap, which I think that was maybe the first time I ever did in Bangladesh. I always went out and visited with people, and I was feeling kind of sick and tired and a little feverish, which is pretty normal if you're living in Bangladesh. And I was laying there, and as I napped, I had a dream. And I dreamed that I was awake and I was living, and I went to, and I got up the next morning and went to class, and I did my class, and I came home from class, and I was tired, and I laid down, and I took a nap, and I was just getting sick, and I got sicker and sicker until finally I couldn't go to class anymore. This is in my dream. Couldn't go to class anymore, and that was really sad because I was really enjoying the class. And then in my dream I got so sick that they took me and they carted me across town to the Square Hospital, which is one of many hundreds of hospitals in Dhaka, and put me in a room in there, and I kept getting sicker and sicker, and I'm in this room in the Square Hospital, and all of my acquaintances there in the city came to visit me, all Muslims, and they came trooping up the stairs into my room in the Square Hospital, and they came around my bed, and then the room kept getting bigger and bigger in my dream, and more people kept coming in there until it was just people as far as I could see in my dream. And there were people from here, students from America, and my people from Bangladesh, and they were all there in that room. And I was laying there on the bed, and they were all wishing me to get well and praying for me in different languages. And all of a sudden I thought to myself, you know what? I've been teaching these people for a long time, and I've taught them English, but I've never really told them about God. I mean, this is Bangladesh, this is Muslim, this is a dangerous place supposedly, etc., etc. And why didn't I tell them about God? I said, well, now here I am. Now's my opportunity. I'm going to tell them they have to get right with the Lord, because I knew in my dream that I wasn't going to live. I knew deep in my heart that I was laying on this hospital bed and I wasn't going to get out of this hospital bed. And so I laid there, and I tried to sit up to talk, and I couldn't sit up. I couldn't move. And they all stopped praying, and the room was quiet, and they looked at me, and I sat, and I knew I was going to die. And I couldn't even talk. I couldn't open my mouth. I couldn't say a word. And then in my dream, I died. And they didn't hear about God. And then I woke up, and just a cold sweat. I don't have many dreams like that. And I jumped out of my bed, and I ran down the stairs. We lived like on the 4th floor of some building, out into the bazaar, and I told all my friends that I met, I said, listen, I've had a dream. I said, I'm going to die. I said, it's from God. I know it's from God. I said, come right to our house. I have something I have to tell you before I die. And so they came, and they're Muslims. They believe in dreams. They believe in this that God speaks through dreams. And they came, and I told them about God, we had Bible studies, and that night I got sicker, and the next day we had more Bible studies, and I went to class and I got sicker yet, and I got sicker and I got sicker, and finally they loaded me up and hauled me into, of all places, the Square Hospital. And they came and visited me in the Square Hospital. I said, guys, I'm not coming out of here alive. I know I'm not. I'm dying. The doctors couldn't find what was wrong with me, and other than just a vicious fever, it ended up having a fever of 105 for 26 days. They couldn't get the fever down hardly. I took more drugs and put IVs in my arms and pumped in antibiotics. I ended up, they think I started off with dengue and graduated to typhoid. It was complicated. I don't even know what's wrong with me. There's still things wrong with me, I'm guessing. Which is a nice thing to blame it on, just saying. Have some things wrong with you. Anyway, and I'm laying in this hospital bed and I'm sick, and the doctors say, we have no idea what's wrong with you. You're not going to die. I said, I'm going to die. I already know that. And I called my family, and they were pretty unhappy about the whole situation, but it was what it was. I was very happy with but then I didn't die. And I went on living, and it was a disappointment to me. It was a real disappointment, but it was a tremendous gift to my life because I thought I was going to die. I knew I was going to die, and it changed the way I thought about teaching. It changed the way I thought about my students in Bangladesh. It changed the way I thought about every kind of part of my relationships with people. And I ask you, we for some reason, we think we're promised tomorrow and the next day and the next year. For some reason, it's something that we think. But if you knew that this school year, this week, this period of time with your family, whatever it may be, these next 9 months, say, was going to be your last, would that change the way you taught your lessons? Would it change the things you taught them? The way you related to your students? Your relationships with your fellow teachers and the board? We get so focused on our plans and our ideas and our comfort and all these things, we forget to pass on the things to our children and to the next generation that matter, that really matter. At the end of the day, my dad never learned to spell. He's not a spelling kind of person. And I think he can probably spell my name, A-A-R-O-N, but it wouldn't necessarily be the same every time he tried it. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Spelling at the end of the day doesn't matter. You can get through and have a perfectly full life without spelling. But there are some things that you can't survive without. And are we teaching those things? Are we teaching the things that really matter? There was a king, and he was a mighty king and a wise king, and his beard was long and gray, and his eyebrows were so long and thick you could hardly see his eyes underneath them. And he was full of wisdom, and he was tired of being king because he'd been king a long time, but he didn't have a son to leave his kingdom to. He only had 3 daughters. And so he called his daughters to him one day and he said, you know, girls, he said, I'm tired of being king. It's stressful, it's hard, and my hair's white, and I have on blood pressure medication. I need a break. And I'm heading off into the mountains, and I have my little bag of tea and a jar of honey, and I'm just going to be in the mountains for a while, and I'm going to leave you here, and you guys are going to run the kingdom, and when I get back, I'm going to choose a queen. And all the girls were like, oh wow, that's exciting. I could be queen if you think that would I would be a good option. And the king said, no. He said, I have a test for you. And he reached into his deep kingly pockets and he pulled out 3 grains of rice. And he gave 1 grain to each of his daughters. And he climbed onto his donkey and he rode off into the wilderness. And his daughter sat there and they looked at those 3 grains of rice. Like, what in the world? This is ridiculous. Dad, this isn't a test. This is food or whatever it is. And the first daughter, she looked and she thought and she smelled and this is just your basic, normal, boring rice. I don't know what to do. But it is the gift of a king, and it is a test of some sort. So she went to the jewelers and they built her a box. And it was built of gold and covered with jewels and locked with a little golden lock and a little golden key. And she put the rice in the box on a bed of velvet and she hauled it down into the deepest, darkest part of the basement and she hid it, and she felt very good with herself because the rice was safe and secure. cure. Second daughter, she looked at the rice and she thought about it and she smelled it and she tasted just a little lick of it and it was boring as can be. And she thought, you know what, I have a life. I'm busy. I have friends to meet and I have food to eat and coffee to drink and things to do. And she took the rice and she threw it over her shoulder and dusted off her hands and went on her busy way. And the third daughter, she looked at that rice and she looked and she thought for a day and a night, what is this rice? What can it mean? And she thought, it's not really enough to make to cook and eat. I mean, there's not even enough to go with a curry. And all of a sudden she thought a grain of rice is also a seed. She carried it out behind the castle barn. She dug a little hole in the ground. She put it in and she put some cow manure around and she watered it and the rice grew and the plant was tall and after a few months the rice was ripe and she harvested it. And it was a handful of rice. And it's a healthy rice plant. And she took the rice and she made a little garden. She planted the rice in the garden and she watered it and she put on manure and she kept the weeds away and she scared the birds away and she sweated a lot and got blisters on her little hands and then she still kept working and working and working and finally she harvested that as well. Now there was enough rice for a field and she went and she planted it in the field and she hired helpers and they helped her and she raised the field of rice. And then there was loads and loads of rice, so they planted many more fields, but they also had some left over and they put it in the barn. And when they harvested the next round of rice, there was just wagons and wagons of rice. And she hauled it all out and after she replanted her fields with all her helpers, she hauled all the rest of the rice off and gave it to the poor people who didn't have food. But she did it just the perfect way without having like unhealthy dependencies on aid and things like that. It was the right system. She had it figured out. Anyway, days went by and weeks and months and years, and one day the three sisters are sitting on the front veranda in their rocking chairs of the castle and they're sipping sweet tea and telling each other about their days. And all of a sudden down the road they see this little cloud of dust and this little donkey, and on the donkey this great big beard is the first thing they noticed. And all of a sudden they realized behind that beard and that hair and those peaceful eyes was their dad. And they jumped off the porch and they ran to meet their dad, and he climbed down off of his donkey and they hugged him and they said, "Welcome home, Dad." And the first thing he said to them was, "Where is the rice that I gave you?" First daughter said, "Hold on," ran into the castle, ran down into the dungeon, got the little golden box, brought it out, unlocked it with the golden key, opened the lid, and there was the rice. Exactly like he gave it to her. "Here's the rice, Dad. I kept it safe. No birds, no bugs, no ants, nothing. It was safe. I did exactly the right thing." And the king looked at that and he didn't say a word, and looked at the next daughter. And the next daughter, she said, "Well, Dad, so give me a minute." Went into the kitchen. She rooted through the cupboards and found the jar of rice and pulled out another little grain of rice and brought it out to her dad and said, "So, Dad, right here is some rice." Dad looked at that and didn't say a word. And he asked the third daughter, "Where's your grain of rice?" And she said, "Well, Dad," she said, "I don't have it." And both of the sisters looked at her and said, "How in the world could you not have the gift of the king?" And the king said, "Well, where is this rice?" And she said, "Dad, it's out there." She pointed at the fields and she said, "The barn is full and you see those wagons going down the road? That's part of the rice too." And the king said, very rightly, he said, "You will be the next queen." All of you have been given gifts, great and kingly gifts. You've been given forgiveness. You've been given Jesus Christ. You've been given mercy and salvation. You've been given a history. You've been given a heritage. You've been given many, many things. You can throw the gift away. You can hide it inside yourself. If you're going to plant the gift, that's what we're talking about this morning. If you're going to plant the gift, it's going to take a lot of work. You're not going to be able to drink a lot of tea. You're going to lose a lot of sleep. You're going to lose parts of your heart, because not everybody you try to plant the gift in will listen. You'll face heartbreak and failure. You're going to have students like this. What are some things that you want to plant? that you must plant to have a generation, the generation after the generation that we heard about this morning that will be faithful. Teach them to love people and to be compassionate to people, to see people with the eyes of God. Willie and I, my brother Willie, who's just an amazing guy, he's a huge part of my life. We were walking we traveled a lot together before I was married, and we were in Kolkata in India one time, and we'd just taken the bus in, and it was like a 30-hour bus ride, and we were tired and got to our little motel, and Kolkata is a wonderful place in India for my brother and I because we can talk to people. They speak Bangla, they're West Bengal, and so we really enjoyed going to Kolkata and eating the food and visiting our friends there, and so it was about 11 o'clock at night, and we were walking out on the streets of Kolkata and looking for a little bite to eat before we went to bed. Now, Kolkata is a fun place, but it's a place that's enslaved with darkness and evil. There's a lot of evil there. Maybe not more than New York City, but it feels a little more. Children are vulnerable in Kolkata. Some of our friends that we have there have lost all their children to kidnapping and so forth. And if the children are nice looking, they're sold as slaves. If they're not, they're cut apart for their organs. And people come from all over the world to get first-class cheap livers and transplants and things like that. So we're walking down the street and we think about these things. Sadly, we know a lot of stories of close friends of ours. Anyway, and we're walking along and this man comes and he meets us and he says hello and we say hello back and on the crowded street, and he wondered if we would like to buy some children for the night. And he thought, he said that we could have them for about 75 cents if we wanted. And we turned to him, my brother and I, and we're Derstines, and we have a large vocabulary in any language when we're angry. And we told him how wicked he was, and how we told him that there's a really special place in hell that's burning just for you to sell a child. Your heart, his heart is dark and full of evil. And we told him that for quite a while, and until he just turned away and walked away. And then we got to thinking about it. Usually the people who are selling the children started off being one of those children that were being sold. And he probably has memories in his childhood that are worse than the worst nightmare I could imagine. And if there's one thing that he knew in his heart above probably any other fact, is that he was broken and he was dirty, and there was a special place in hell just for him. And God brought us together across thousands and tens of thousands of miles to tell him about a healer. Someone who could take his brokenness and make him whole. We were so full of righteous indignation, we didn't see him like Jesus saw him, and we didn't offer him healing. Teach your children to see people like they see them, like God sees them. And you have to see people that way yourself, and that's to everybody. That's the child seller and the child. That's your neighbor next door. That's the people who have wronged you. Compassion. This world is not very full of compassion. Teach them compassion. Teach them to be trustworthy. Teach them to be real. Teach them the value of time. There was a king, again in India, northern India. It's a story by Leo Tolstoy. And he had 3 questions, and you probably know this story. But he had 3 questions. He said, if I'm going to be a king in this country, and I'm an effective king, I want answers to 3 questions. And these were his questions. He said, what is the most important time? Who are the most important people, and what is the most important thing to do? And so he called people all over the world to come and answer these questions, and they came by droves, and they told him all kinds of answers. They said the most important time is early in the morning when you just get up and you've just drunk your coffee and you're full of energy. That's going to be your most important time. Think of that as a king. Or late at night, or the middle of the day, or your time of rest. That's very important. Or meditation. Or what is the most important thing to do? Well, to be a good king, and to take care of yourself, and to make sure you get enough taxes, and to, they had all kinds of answers. Who are the most important people? Well, the educators, or the moms, or maybe, or whatever. And the king, none of these answers just felt like the right answer. And so he kept looking, and then he heard in the north of the kingdom, in Kashmir, up in the mountains, there was a wise old man who lived alone in a little hut, whose beard was long and white, and his eyebrows were long and white, and his eyes were wise and old. But this man wouldn't see rich people, he only saw the poor. And so the king said, well, I want to go talk to him. He's the only one who won't come to the palace. Maybe he has some answers. So he packed up his soldiers and his people, and they went to the foot of the mountain, and he left the soldiers at the foot of the mountain and dressed in an old robe, and he climbed up the mountain to the old man, and he got up there, and the old man was out there in front of his little house digging in his garden, and he said to him, old man, I have some questions for you. And the old man didn't even look up from his digging. And the king sat down, and he couldn't really ask his questions if he didn't have his attention, the old man's attention. So he sat and he watched and saw the old man was kind of breathing hard and sweating. And so he got up off his rock and told the old man to sit down and let him dig for a while. So the king scratched around in the garden until it was evening. And then the old man, he still didn't say a word. And they went into the wise man's house, and they had supper, a very simple supper, and they laid down and they went to bed. The king slept on the floor, and they slept. And in the morning they got up, and the king said, I'm staying until I get some answers. In his heart, he said. And he got up and they ate a little breakfast and drank some water and started digging again. A little while later, when the sun was just getting hot and the morning was coming on, this man came running up the mountain. And he has a great gaping hole in his side, and he's bleeding, and he's barely alive, and he falls down on the ground, and the king runs over there and puts a compress on his side and wraps him up and gives him some soup and lays him on his bed on the old man, the wise man's bed. And finally the man, he comes back to. He passed out from loss of blood, and he comes back to, and he looks up at the king and says, oh, you're the king. And the king said, yeah, he's the king. And the man said, well, he said, I came here to kill you because you made a law that, and the story doesn't matter now, he said, but because of you, my brother was thrown in jail and lost everything he had. And we were so miserable that I decided the only thing to do was to come and kill you. But I saw you go up the mountain, and I waited for you at the bottom all day long, and you never came back down, and I would have killed you if you had. You didn't come back down, and so finally I came up to try to find you, but your soldiers saw me on the way and wounded me. But now you saved my life, and now I can't kill you. And the king said, I'm really sorry to hear about your brother. He said, I didn't realize that. We'll make sure that's taken care of, and that's fair. And the old man and the man that came to kill the king, he laid back on the bed, and he just said, he said, thank you for your forgiveness. He said, I want to serve you. I want to be your servant, and I'll be a faithful servant. And the old man, the wise man who'd been watching this whole thing, came over to the king, and he said, I think you have your answers to your question now. He said, when you came up yesterday, you saw me digging in the garden, and you stopped, and because you stopped and helped me dig, you didn't lose your life. At that point, I was the most important person. Then, when this man came running up, here all wounded and bloody, he was the most important person. The most important person always is the person in front of you. And when you came up and saw me digging, there I was digging, and I was sweating and tired and hot and miserable. And the thing you were supposed to do was help me dig. And you did. That was the most important thing to do. Of all the things you could have been doing in the world, to help me dig in my garden was the most important thing. And then when this man came, all bleeding and tired, to help him was the most important thing. The most important person is always the one in front of you. The most important thing to do is always to help and bring healing to those people. And the most important time is always now. It's the only time we ever have any control over. Teach them the value of time and what they should be doing. Teach them to love learning, the discipline. They say that an educator's job, especially in younger children, is to teach them how to learn, the discipline of learning, and they can go on and learn build their whole life on that. But most importantly by far, show them God. Show them how to love God. Show them how to serve Him. Be so full of God and His that when they look at you, they get glimpses of God. Teach them who God is and help them see with His eyes. Now in North Carolina, we have a problem. We have, years and years ago, there was somebody had the bright idea that they could bring moths over from China that make silk and feed them mulberry leaves here in America and have American homegrown silk. And they brought them over here and it worked really well until the moths got away and flew off into the wilderness and started doing very well out there. And we call them gypsy moths. I don't know if you have them this far north or not, but we call them gypsy moths. And what they do is they go into an area. The harmful stage is when they're caterpillars and they climb up into they have eggs in the ground. When the eggs hatch, they climb up into trees and they eat all the leaves off of the trees, every leaf. And because they eat all the leaves off the trees, the trees can't convert sunlight into sugar and they die. And so it's a problem. We're loggers and we like trees, and dead trees are of very little value. And so they've been trying to control gypsy moths for years and years with many different methods. They spray them, they turn chickens loose. There's 100 different things they've tried to control gypsy moths. And when you spray them, it kind of works, but it also kills everything. And they're actually really hard to spray because they build these little silk nests in the trees. And you can spray the nests, and the worms are pretty protected inside there. It's just a mess. Until they found the weak spot in the gypsy moth's life cycle. So when a gypsy moth, when the worm finishes eating all the leaves off the tree, climbs back down the tree and he goes over and he finds a nice little spot on the ground, he digs a hole, spins himself a little cocoon in that hole, and he incubates down there, whatever he does, until the time comes for him to hatch. And then he hatches and he climbs out of the ground, both the males and the females do, and neither one has mouths even to eat with. Their little bit of stored body fat is all the energy they have. They live for 3 days. When the females hatch, they're so full of eggs and so big they can't fly. And so they walk, and that's how a gypsy moth spreads its territory. She walks, and she can walk about 300 feet before she is out of energy and she has to lay her eggs and die. So as soon as the female hatches, she walks, and she walks as fast as she can to make her 300 feet away from the dead trees to the new trees, and then she can lay her eggs, and the next generation of gypsy moths can do their thing and be happy. Well, the males wake up, and all they really have is all their job in life is to find the females. And it's not as easy as it sounds, because they're walking in the grass, and the males, they have wings, they can fly, they're not full of eggs, but it's not very easy to find a moth walking in the grass. So a female moth puts out a strong smell, pheromones, and it's a sweet smell to a male moth, and they literally wake up. The first thing they do is they sniff, and they fly, and they find a female moth, and they mate with her to fertilize her eggs, and then they die. That's their job. They're finished. That's it. Well, the sneaky people thought, now what if, when these moths wake up, what if there's a way we could tempt the males from ever finding the females, and in so doing we could keep them from finding them, and a generation of eggs would be infertile and die. So they waited and they watched, and they went to their labs and they worked on smells, and they duplicated a female gypsy moth's pheromone smell so it was even better and stronger than the original. And they soaked bran flakes in this smell, loads and loads of them, because bran flakes will decompose and disappear. And they waited till the perfect time when these eggs are hatching, and they took planes and they spread the bran flakes over the forest. And the females woke up and they walked 300 feet, laid their eggs, and died. The males woke up and they sniffed and they flew to the strongest smell. And every single one of them went to a bran flake. And they went there and they hung out there with that bran flake until they died. And a whole generation of gypsy moths were never born. Not a single one. There were no gypsy moths in this area. They were eradicated. They disappeared. The devil is like that. We have a job to do. We have a job of getting another generation equipped and prepared to follow in God's footsteps, to learn to know God, to be God's children, to build the kingdom of God. But the devil has surrounded us with hundreds of smells. And fathers, sometimes we get distracted with those smells. I'm not a father, but I'm headed that direction, good Lord willing. If we follow and we go to the clever imitations that the devil has put all around us, we will lose our children. What are you giving your energy to? What is taking your time? The gypsy moths live 3 days. I think in the big scheme of things, our little tiny lives are not much different. God looking down sees us with these little lives and He wonders, what in the world are you wasting your time on? You have 3 days. There's not enough time to get in, barely enough time to get done what I need you to do, and you're just spending it with a bran flake. Doing things that don't matter, won't impact the next generation, won't help build my kingdom. What is real? What is worth passing down? What is worth spending your life following? What is worth chasing? Think about that. Teachers are a little bit like trees. I love in the Bible where it compares people to trees. In the Bible, a number of different places it compares people to sheep, and it compares them to plants, and it compares them to trees. And I kind of like the tree picture. In Psalm 1, we have the beautiful verse about, and he shall be like a tree, and he's planted by the rivers of water. He brings forth his fruit in his season. His leaves don't wither no matter what happens, because his roots are in the water, and whatever he does prospers. Our roots this is a healthy picture. This is what we want to be like. We want to help our children become like that tree. And good Lord willing, tomorrow we're going to talk about how to get them to that place. But if you're one thing to think about, as a tree, your roots go down, you're getting sustenance, you're converting His light, His teaching into the sugar that makes your life go. You're going to bear fruit. And interestingly enough, a tree can't choose to bear a fruit different than it is. I love to do trees, and I have some experimental grafting projects going on, and that's one option of getting another fruit on another tree. But a plum tree can't just choose to bear peaches. What's inside will come out. And I think there's a bit of a lesson there. As a teacher, as a parent, as a role model, as a young person, as an influencer, we all influence people. We will bear fruit, and that fruit will come from who we are inside. Not who you wish you were, not who you know you should be, not who other people think you are, but who you really are. That is what makes the fruit. An apple will come from an apple tree. And if you're not what you should be, and bananas keep popping out on your apple tree, you can't fix that by yourself either. But there is a healer who can take who you are and turn you into who you could be and who you should be. As a teacher, you cannot afford to get the inside wrong. So I want to tell you another short story here. Another story by Leo Tolstoy. there was, and I'm sure you all know this story, but it's one of my very favorites. It's a beautiful story that I read often because it reminds me of Jesus' teachings. There was a shoemaker, and he sat in his little shoe shop below the street, and he made shoes for people, and he loved people, and he watched for people, and he had been a bitter old man, but he found the Lord, and he read his Bible, and he thought, and he prayed, and he was full of God. And one day he's reading in the Bible, and he reads where Jesus came into a house, and there was a lady that came and washed his feet with her tears and dried them with her hair. And there was a Pharisee who was standing right beside him, and she said, "Why are you doing this? This is disgusting. Quit touching the teacher." And the teacher said, "Actually, I came into this house, and you didn't give me water to wash my feet. And this woman did. And you didn't show me hospitality, but this woman is doing it from her heart. And she will be blessed for that." And people will retell that story forever. And then Martin thought, the shoemaker, he said, "If Jesus were to come to my house, would I be the Pharisee or would I be the woman who ministered to him?" And so he's sitting there in his chair, and he's thinking and he's dreaming, and that time when your work is done and the tea is hot and the honey's good, and his long white beard was there growing, and his eyebrows were long and thick, and his eyes were peaceful, and he sat there in this particular state and dozed off and had a dream. And in his dream, Jesus said, "I'm going to come and visit you tomorrow." And he woke up and he was all excited, and he cleaned his house and he cleaned it again, and he was more excited than could be, and he set his alarm super early, and he got out of bed after he had a very unrestful night of excitement about the next day, and he made tea and he made cakes, and he was just all excited about this Jesus coming to visit him, and he would be ready. And as he sat in the morning waiting for Jesus, he saw the old soldier that swept the street out there, sweeping and blowing on his hands, and sweeping and blowing on his hands. And he said, until Jesus gets here, you might as well bring this guy in and feed him some tea at least, because he's looking pretty cold. And so he called in the soldier, and he came in. They sat together and drank tea and ate little cakes, and the soldier got all warmed up, and he sent him out with a pair of new boots, and the love of God shining in his face. And time went on a little bit later, and he keeps looking out the window, and where is Jesus? And he climbs out on the street every now and then, looks up and down, and still no Jesus shows up, but he sees down the street a little ways and a lady with her little boy, or a little baby, and she's holding him, and they both look cold, and it's very cold outside. It's in Russia, and why are they all alone out there, and not enough clothes? And she calls the lady, and she says, "Come in and have some tea." And she comes in and brings her little baby, and they come in, and he gives her tea and little cakes and warm clothes, and they talk for a while, and he encourages her, and she tells him a little bit about her story, and he gives her some money and sends her on her way, just full of warmth and love and God. And then, as the day wears on and the afternoon comes and still no Jesus, he's looking on the street, and he sees this little old apple seller lady walking down the street, and behind him comes sneaking up a skinny little boy who grabs an apple and turns and runs. Well, the lady, old as she is lightning fast, and strikes and grabs him by the arm and hauls him in and says, "All right, buddy, that's one apple too many. Now you're going to end up in jail, and it's going to be hard for you." And the little boy is wailing and howling and saying, "I'm just hungry, I need an apple." And the old lady's like, and at this point, Martin, he climbs out of his shoe shop, and he goes up there, and he says, "Granny," he said, "he's just a little boy. It was just an apple. And besides, you're a really old lady." And he tells and it's hard work what you're doing. And he talked to the little boy and said, "Why don't you help this old lady carry her apples to her house, and she doesn't have to work so hard. And don't steal from her. You should help her. I bet if you would help her do all her sales and things like that, she probably would let you have an apple, and you wouldn't have to be so hungry." And the lady, her heart was softened, and she said, "Of course you can have an apple." And the little boy's heart was softened, and he said, "Of course he'll carry the lady's apples to her house." And they went on their way arm in arm, him munching apples and carrying, and just delightful things happened. And then he went back home and he sat down, and he was in that, and darkness fell and the lights came on in the city, and Jesus still hadn't come and visited him. And he sat in his chair and he said, well, hey, it was worth a try. I guess sometimes dreams aren't quite what you think they are. And all his cakes were gone and his tea was finished, and he didn't have any money anyway because he'd given that away too. And as he was sitting there in his rocking chair and thinking, he fell asleep again. And in his dream, he saw Jesus, or he heard Jesus, and he said, Jesus, why didn't you come and visit me today? And Jesus said, well, he said, I did. And Martin said, when? I missed you. How did I miss you? I thought I was watching, but how did I miss you? And Jesus said, it is I. And in Martin's dream, he saw the old soldier, and he saw the young mother and her baby, and he saw the apple seller and the little boy. And he realized that Jesus had visited him as the least of these my brethren. And I want you, as you are equipping your children and teaching them for the eyes of God, to open your eyes and pray this prayer to God. Pray for Him to open your eyes so you can see the people around you like He sees them. This world is full of pain and hurting people and broken people, and it's worse every day. Ask for His eyes so you can see these people as He sees them. Bring His healing, forgiveness to the people around you. Look beyond the exteriors and the hardness and the violence and the hate, and see the hurt and the pain. Ask the one who sees everything to let you have a peek at what He's seeing and see people as He sees them. Show compassion. Even when the crowd was screaming for His blood, Jesus looked beyond all the violence and the hate, and He saw the broken hearts, and He loved them, and He asked God to forgive them. Learn to know your people, the people around you, the people God brings into your life, the appointments He makes for you. Invite them into your life and serve them. Fill yourself with so much God that He is all they can see when they look at you. Only in this way can you pass on what truly matters. God bless you.